Landman already knows that M-Tex needs a new president to replace Tommy Norris. The show just hasn't said it out loud yet. Everything in the story is pointing in that direction, not as a twist, but as an inevitability. The cracks aren't subtle anymore. They're structural, and they exist precisely because Tommy is sitting in a chair that no longer fits him or the company. The clearest sign is how often Tommy is sidelined in decisions that supposedly fall under his authority. A president who can't decisively steer strategy isn't leading, he's absorbing impact. Major calls involving Galeno, funding lifelines, and long-term exposure are increasingly framed as negotiations happening around Tommy, not through him. That's not accidental writing. It's the show quietly demonstrating that the title no longer matches the power. M-Tex is no longer in a phase where intuition and grit are enough. It's in survival mode, dealing with debt, external pressure, and predatory partnerships. That kind of environment requires a president who can compartmentalize, make cold decisions, and accept morally gray compromises without internal collapse. Tommy can't. He feels every compromise as a personal failure. That might make him human, but it makes him ineffective in this role. The show also keeps pairing Tommy with characters who highlight his misalignment. Galeno is ruthless and transactional. Cammy is calculated and long-range. Even secondary players operate with a clarity Tommy no longer has. He's constantly reacting, constantly defending, constantly explaining. Presidents dictate narratives. They don't chase them. The fact that Tommy spends so much time justifying his position is itself a signal that the role has outgrown him. What's especially telling is that Landman never frames the company's survival as dependent on Tommy's leadership, only on his endurance. That's a huge difference. The story treats him like a buffer, someone who can take the hits long enough for others to maneuver. But buffers are replaceable by design. Leaders aren't. The show's language around him has quietly shifted, and that shift matters. Replacing Tommy wouldn't be a betrayal of his character. It would complete his arc. His strength has always been execution, not administration. Influence, not optics. The presidency has stripped him of flexibility while amplifying his weaknesses. M-Tex doesn't need another man willing to suffer in silence. It needs someone who can see the board clearly and move pieces without emotional hesitation. There's also the issue of perception. Internally and externally, M-Tex looks unstable because its president looks exhausted and constrained. Investors sense hesitation. Partners sense vulnerability. Galeno senses opportunity. A new president, someone colder, steadier, and less personally entangled, would immediately change the company's posture, even if nothing else changed overnight. The show has already laid the groundwork for this transition. Tommy is increasingly framed as the moral center, not the strategic one. He questions decisions instead of making them. He absorbs consequences instead of shaping outcomes. That's not a downgrade. It's a repositioning. He's becoming the conscience of the company, which is exactly why he shouldn't be running it. And perhaps most importantly, Landman has shown us that keeping Tommy in place is actively harming him. His family life is collapsing. His instincts are dulled. His relationships are eroding. If the show truly understands its own character, it knows that the only way to preserve what makes Tommy compelling is to take the presidency away from him, or have him walk away from it himself. M-Tex needing a new president isn't a question of loyalty or competence. It's about alignment. The company has evolved into something that requires a different kind of leadership. Tommy Norris hasn't failed M-Tex. The role has failed him. At this point, the only real question Landman has left to answer is not whether M-Tex will replace Tommy, but who will have the nerve to say it first, and whether Tommy will be brave enough to agree.